What's going on, guys? Hope you're all doing well. Now for today's video, I wanted to talk about the most mysterious Alien sequel that we never got to see. One that actually had a lot of involvement of big name alien people both in front of and behind the camera that had worked on films before in the past, and also those whom they wanted to bring in to help make the franchise a little bit bigger than it had been before. This is a movie that was going to happen at one point in time, but it unfortunately got canceled for a very specific reason that I'm sure a lot of Alien fans have never felt very good about. That being said, the mysteries surrounding it are really cool and something that we have never really gotten much clarification on. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, after Alien Resurrection came out in 1997, the original plans after that movie were to make a film set on planet Earth. And they actually had a script written by Joss Whedon that was ready to go for all of that, but Sigourney Weaver said that she personally didn't feel like it was a good setting for an Alien movie. It always bored her, and it just wasn't somewhere that she wanted to go. Keep in mind that she barely even wanted to do Alien Resurrection because she felt like her character needed to be killed off in order to make some sort of real sacrifice and meaning to the franchise, which is why Alien 3 went down the way it did, and why they had to clone her and give her a whole bunch of money to do Part 4.
Make a nice souvenir.
With that being said, one of the things that we do know would have been a shoo-in for Alien 5, this version of it anyways, is the fact that James Cameron was very interested in coming back to the project, and Ridley Scott, of all people, wanted to direct it. There was a lot of interviews back in the day that shed a little bit of light on the subject matter, but unfortunately we never really got a finalization into what the film would have become. James Cameron was quoted way back in the day around 2003 saying, "We're looking at doing another one. Something similar to what we did with Aliens, a bunch of great characters, and of course Sigourney Weaver." Now get this, he even said that he'd been in discussions with the possibility of putting Arnold Schwarzenegger into an Alien movie, which would have been extremely interesting because now post-Alien vs. Predator, we all know Dutch and that guy's role in the Predator universe. So to see, Arnold jump over into an Alien film, more than likely playing a completely different character,
you, but not you. You're me. No shit.
would have been very, very different and interesting, especially since Cameron's talking about making a movie similar to Aliens, something a little bit more of an action punch, also being directed by Ridley Scott, who helmed the first movie.
Let's rock!
And keep in mind, guys, Ridley Scott was fresh off of the success of Gladiator from 2000, and James Cameron was working on Avatar at the time, which was being called Project 880, but this is all really, really fascinating stuff to learn about. What makes it even more interesting, though, is Ridley Scott actually talked about throwing Nicolas Cage into the cast after working with him on Matchstick Men. We don't know for certain if that would have been a finalization thing, if it would have gone the distance, but all we know at this point, James Cameron writing, Sigourney Weaver returning, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Nicolas Cage being considered for what Ridley Scott would have directed. That alone sounds extremely interesting, and like I said, there is so much mystery behind all of this information that it's hard to really say what's going on. And I think the thing that really makes all this stuff fascinating to think about is that James Cameron really couldn't stand Alien 3. And he even told people back in the day how they could just go in there and kill off all these great characters we introduced in Aliens. This is a direct quote. And the correlation between mother and daughter, it stunk. But hopefully, I'll get a chance to rectify all of that with Alien 5. So you've got right there off the bat, he's pretty pissed off and wants to change what happened. Now, there actually was a very long, extensive conversation that James Cameron had after that I think goes into detail about what the movie could have been, and also where his headspace was when he was gearing up to make Alien 5. Nearly 20 years ago now, James Cameron was interviewed on this Unmade movie and talked about Ridley Scott's involvement and what the film could have been like. Again, quoting the director, "Yeah, Ridley and I talked about doing another Alien film, and I said to 20th Century Fox that I would develop a fifth Alien film. I started working on a story, I was working with another writer, and Fox came back to me and said, 'We've got this really good script for Alien vs. Predator,' and I got pretty upset." Cameron said, "You do that, you're going to kill the validity of the franchise in my mind, because to me, that was Frankenstein meets werewolf. It was Universal just taking their assets and starting to play them off against each other, milking it. So I stopped work. Then I saw Alien vs. Predator, and it was actually pretty good. I think of the 5 Alien films, I'd rate it third. James Cameron continued by saying, I mean, I felt when I was making Aliens, I think the same thing Ridley was doing with Alien, which is, I'm going to make you think this is real. Even though it is completely ridiculous deep space adventure, we're going to make you feel like it's real. It's a question of, does the film take itself seriously or not? People asked him after that whether he was still interested in doing something with Alien 5, and he flat out said no. Which is a shame because I agree with him completely here, and I know that the reason this film didn't get made was because of Alien vs. Predator, but the way that James Cameron and Ridley Scott ground their movies in a universe, I have a lot of respect for that because as a Jurassic Park fan, Jurassic Park and the Lost World did so much to actually solidify what that world was. And while I'm not angry at the Jurassic World trilogy as a whole, I am upset at the fact that they fumbled it and didn't pay attention to their own material and ended up making Dominion, which I really don't like. And Cameron follows this up on Alien 5 saying, well, the other thing I've learned is that when you deal with a studio and it's their asset, he's talking about the Alien franchise, it's their asset. And I should have learned that lesson with Planet of the Apes, which I actually have a whole video on in the past if you're interested in checking it out. He was going to do Arnold Schwarzenegger in Planet of the Apes. He says he had a great idea with Planet of the Apes, but it was Fox's asset. Even though I was supposedly developing it, we didn't see eye to eye, and they sort of picked up their marbles, and that was that. They turned out, I think, probably the most egregious film that they could have on that subject because they miscast the director. It's the only Tim Burton film that I don't like. He's obviously talking about what that movie became, which is the Tim Burton remake from 2001. So yeah, guys, that pretty much sums up James Cameron's opinions on Alien 5 and why it didn't happen. We know Ridley Scott was going to direct it. We know he was going to write it, James Cameron. Arnold Schwarzenegger was being, talked about in discussions to be in the film alongside Sigourney Weaver, and Nicolas Cage was even thrown in there at one point. We don't necessarily know what was going on with everyone else, but I just thought all this stuff was extremely interesting.
You bastard!
Probably the most interesting thing about Alien 5 is the fact that James Cameron wanted to rectify what was done in Alien 3. Ridley Scott wanted to direct it. They had all these people coming in, and it definitely would have been one of the most interesting films from any of these people, ever. I don't know if it would have abandoned the canon set up in Alien 3 and been a direct sequel to Aliens, although James Cameron does make it sound like he would have made a sequel to his film. He even said that he was going to use his film as a jumping off point. So whether or not that would have been through some sort of alternate timeline, maybe Ripley Clone 8 fell through a wormhole or something, I have no idea. But in a similar way to what Neil Blomkamp was talking about with his version of Alien 5, this was something different. And I think that's really, really cool. There's a lot of mystery still surrounding what it would have been like finalized, especially after Alien Resurrection. But I do think the ideas that they had going on here were fun and something to really think about. Arnold Schwarzenegger in an Alien movie with Sigourney Weaver. How could you not think that's interesting? Anyways, guys, those are all just my own thoughts on the subject matter. What do you think of this mysterious unmade Alien sequel? And what are your thoughts on the movies they have made? Just a quick rundown for me. Alien and Aliens are great. Alien 3's assembly cut I really enjoy. Alien Resurrection is really fun, but also really, really bad. The AVP movies are a no-go, even though I do like the fighting in the first one. Prometheus is good. Covenant, well, it happened.